Okay, so patch 1.05 has dropped, and in this video let's go over the changes that have occurred for Yoshimitsu. Not necessarily just going over the notes, but seeing the significance of those changes. In short, Yoshi is looking to last a bit longer in heat, have more consistency in his attacks, and have more legitimacy in his Indian stance that adds to, while being in line with, his gameplay design in Tekken 8. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip over the bug fixes, in part because I never really experienced them, but also because I don't really have the ability to replicate them and confirm that they've been solved adequately. So I'm leaving a link to the patch notes in the description, so check that out. So first thing I want to cover in these balance changes, they reduced the heat consumption for a few of his Dragonfly moves, Dragonfly forward 1+2 and his Dragonfly 1, so now their heat consumption is half as much as it used to be. Apparently, these buffs are to make Dragonfly forward 1+2 and Dragonfly 1 more appealing to use in heat, and I guess I can see that. Dragonfly forward 1+2 is a quick damaging high that prevents swinging, and it gives the stance a lot of teeth with how it complements Dragonfly 4 as the quick mid option by giving a reason for the opponent to duck. For the risk you're taking with the high option and the good chance of this move getting blocked by conservative opponents, it looks like using forward 1+2 in heat kinda becomes a bad deal when compared to his other options. When that's the case, then Dragonfly as a whole is not incentivized while in heat. I didn't use it much myself, so perhaps that's what the devs were seeing. Dragonfly 1, in addition to the reduced heat consumption, also got a pretty big buff to his damage, now 22 damage and 26 damage in heat. Similarly, the cost benefit was not as good for this move. Like, yeah, it's a launcher in heat, but being a slow move in Dragonfly, particularly, makes it harder to land and risky to attempt if placed poorly. And just as a reminder, this was an unblockable before Tekken 8, and the normal damage and tracking was not changed until this patch. So the people that were using these moves anyway will enjoy having more heat, but the changes really opened up Dragonfly in heat to be more worthwhile as a whole to Yoshi players. Next is my favorite buff of this patch. Kinsho down 1 crouch cancel is back. So it was introduced in Tekken 7, it was removed in Tekken 8, and yeah, it was very sad for us. Yoshi mains were all rejoicing now that it's back. It's like seeing your lost pet return home, man. And yeah, so it's actually really nice to have this back. Kin stance is not much of a mid-low mix-up stance, but more having multiple attacks to beat your opponent's reaction, and that's pretty evident from the lack of lows, and the lows pretty fairly slow. So against players that are sharp enough to block the Kin down 1, the cancel is great for making them second guess their block punish. Now Kinsho down 1 is far less committal, and you have another way to throw off your opponent's timing. Now, the star of this patch is undoubtedly all the changes they've made to Indian stance. First, they've made the ability to buffer inputs going into Indian stance, which is actually extremely helpful, at least for me, because before it was actually fairly tight window, not a tight window, but it was very hard to get attacks very quickly out of Indian stance because there was no ability to buffer, so it actually made all of his follow-up options a little bit slower, so having this buffer makes it easier to use and makes your options a lot more consistent and quicker. They've also made the actual execution time a bit quicker by a frame or so. So that just makes Indian stance by itself a little bit easier to use. They've also added transitions into Indian stance so you can get a little bit more easily from full crouch and from full crouch down forward 4. Both these are very nice options to get into Indian stance, and while the down forward 4 is probably what's going to get a lot of attention, I think ultimately people are going to find getting into Indian stance from crouch to be a lot more useful. Just think about all the situations where Yoshi is full crouch and trying to do a mix-up, and he has the ability to now get into Indian stance from there, in addition to all those times where he's forced crouch from another attack or blocking an attack. Now he has an option to get into Indian stance and the force mix-up immediately. This is combined with, now in this patch, making Indian 3+4 a homing move. So Indian 3+4 is a new move they added in Tekken 8, which does not require that huge spinning startup that a lot of his other options in Indian stance does. It comes out in 17 frames and it's a mid move, so now that it's mid and homing, it really forces players to respect Indian stance now that they can no longer completely negate it with movement. Something that's a bit of an issue for stance characters like Yoshimitsu in Tekken 8 is all the aggression-based tools at every character's disposal. Like stronger power crushes, heat burst, heat smash, rage arts don't give a damn about your stance transitions. And combo conversions using heat also make stance transitions riskier. So the mechanics of Tekken 8 help nullify the game plan of these characters. So besides the straight power increases, one of the solutions Namco seems to be going with is further increasing the frame advantage on hit for these transitions and making you hold whatever comes out. So now if you're hit by full crouch down forward 4 for the Indian stance transition, you're -8 and now you gotta hold it. Either that or quickly interrupt his options and risk eating the 3+4, which wouldn't be the end of the world, but it's still a sizable amount of damage, and now you're dealing with Dragonfly at -14. So it's a game you have to play now. Indian 2 now has a nice range buff now, which is nice. It's a move I basically never used because it was basically a guaranteed whip, so being able to, I guess, a little bit more reliably hit people is pretty nice. Now regarding Indian 4, yes, you can actually use Indian 4 to go back into the Indian sit stance and you could do a loop. So these Indian 4 loops are there, but the sweep is still kind of reactable and still like -1000 on block, so yeah, I don't see this being a new Yoshi Vortex, and all in all, even after these changes, I think Dragonfly is still the scarier stance than Indian Sit. That said, Indian Sit is far more easy to use, far more usable, and definitely worth putting into the game plan. You're definitely going to see it a lot more. So that's it for the changes in this patch. My early impressions, these changes do quite a lot to improve Yoshi's gameplay. Though I don't believe they alone elevate his strength relative to the other characters. So if he's rising a tier list, it's because other characters went down. And that's because while these increase the amount of guessing games Yoshi can enforce, they still rely heavily on the Yoshi's ability to read and condition the other player, and not so much increasing the lethality of his options. The exception of course being his Dragonfly 1. Manji Clan. This is an exciting time. Since Tekken 6, modern Yoshi has struggled in the practicality of his gameplay, but in every game he gets closer to his ideal, what he should be. I think a lot of us expected nerfs in 1.5, in part because we just kind of got used to Yoshi being a low and mid tier character to the point of thinking that he belonged there. But not anymore. Our dedication to the character will really be paying off. Finally, a strong, complete Yoshimitsu is realized, where his stances all complement each other and are rewarding to use. Apparently 1.5 is the last major balance patch for a while, and a lot of other characters got a pretty significant amount of changes as well, so we'll see in time just how things shake up. One thing we know for sure is that if you're up against a good Yoshi player, you cannot be autopilot on offense and you cannot be sleeping on defense. So I hope this video provided some good context for the Yoshi changes. Definitely let me know how you're feeling about Yoshi in Tekken 8. And with that, have a good one.